I remember the first time I saw Samantha, the way the late afternoon light played upon her hair, as if nature itself had chosen that moment to reveal her beauty. It was during a warm, unhurried summer evening at a small local art gallery. I was drawn to her gentle smile and the sparkle in her eyes, which seemed to promise the unfolding of a beautiful future. In those early days, every moment we spent together felt like an affirmation of a love destined to last forever. We talked for hours about our dreams, the books we loved, the music that stirred our souls. In every conversation, I found myself more convinced that Samantha was my soulmate. Our relationship blossomed quickly, like a delicate flower nurtured by mutual understanding and shared passions. We explored the hidden corners of the city, discovering quaint coffee shops and silent parks where time seemed to slow. Her laughter became the soundtrack to my days, and her presence a comforting constant. Friends and family marveled at our connection. They described it as pure, genuine, a love that could withstand any storm. Yet even in the midst of this idyllic existence, faint shadows began to stir at the edges of our bliss. There were moments when Samantha would receive a phone call and, though her smile never faltered, her eyes would briefly betray a hint of something unspoken. I told myself it was nothing more than the demands of a busy life, but deep down, a quiet alarm started to ring. The early days of our relationship were filled with vivid, almost cinematic moments. I recall a rainy afternoon spent huddled under the canopy of an old bookstore, the scent of wet pavement mingling with the musty aroma of ancient pages. Samantha had insisted on buying a book for me, a collection of poems that she said spoke of love and loss. As we sat in a little nook by the window, we discussed the intricacies of each verse. Those shared secrets, whispered amid raindrops, seemed to weave our hearts even closer together. Our lives became a tapestry of shared memories, celebrating birthdays with impromptu picnics in the park, long midnight walks where we shared our deepest fears and wildest aspirations, and quiet evenings at home where the soft hum of our favorite vinyl records filled the silence. Our friends saw us as the perfect couple, a beacon of trust and affection in a world where such purity seemed rare. However, amid the laughter and tender moments, subtle discrepancies began to emerge. It started with the small things, a forgotten phone call here, a slightly altered routine there. Samantha's once predictable schedule began to show gaps, moments unaccounted for by work or social engagements. At first, I brushed these off as minor oversights, inconsequential in the grand scheme of our love. But then, the phone calls. Late at night, when the world was silent and the only light was the glow of my computer screen, I noticed that her phone would sometimes light up with incoming messages from unknown numbers. I tried to rationalize it. Perhaps it was just a misdial or a wrong number. Yet, in the back of my mind, the nagging feeling that something wasn't right grew louder with each passing day. The more I observed, the more I began to notice the hushed tone in her voice during phone calls, an urgency and secrecy that did not belong in the carefree days we once shared. As the months wore on, the cracks in our seemingly perfect relationship widened into chasms of doubt and suspicion. I found myself plagued by restless nights, my mind replaying every conversation, every fleeting glance, searching for hidden meanings that could explain the unexplained. I began to notice how Samantha's attention seemed divided when we were out with friends. There were moments when her eyes would drift away, as if her thoughts were consumed by someone else, someone I was not a part of. The transformation was gradual. I started to question every minor detail, every irregularity that once had seemed trivial. A misplaced smile, a sudden excuse to step away to take a call. It all added up in my mind to paint a picture of deception. Despite my love for her, the evidence was slowly accumulating in the corners of my heart like dark ink seeping into paper. I spent countless evenings poring over our digital conversations, rereading old messages, and trying to find a clue that could confirm what my instincts were screaming. The once clear portrait of our love became muddied by ambiguity and mistrust. My inner turmoil grew with every unanswered question. Could it be that the woman who had captured my heart was living a double life? Was my intuition right, or was I letting paranoia take control of my thoughts? The turning point came on an otherwise ordinary afternoon. I had been sifting through some of Samantha's emails on our shared computer, an innocent enough act born out of concern when she left a window open on her recent correspondence. That's when I saw it. A series of emails exchanged with a man named Derek, who once had been a trusted figure in her life. The subject lines were innocuous at first, messages about work updates and schedule changes, but as I read on, the tone shifted. There were hints of intimacy, lines that blurred the boundary between professional courtesy and personal longing. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the damning digital footprints. Each email was a blow to the foundation of trust I had built my life upon. The shock was overwhelming. Every word, every phrase of their secret correspondence felt like a betrayal so deep it left me numb. The person I had believed to be the center of my world was now someone I scarcely recognized. The revelation plunged me into a vortex of emotions: grief, anger, disbelief, and a desperate need for answers. I confronted myself with the painful realization that the betrayal was not just a fleeting mistake, but a deliberate and calculated deception. It wasn't enough to simply know the truth. I had to be certain. I needed more evidence to face the reality of Samantha's infidelity. The emails were just the beginning. I had to gather every shred of proof, every hidden trace of her double life. Determined to reclaim the dignity I felt slipping away, I embarked on an obsessive quest for proof. Nights turned into mornings as I became a silent detective in my own life. I started by combing through her digital devices, seeking any hint of clandestine communications. My heart pounded with every text message that popped up on my screen, every image file that was suspiciously labeled or mysteriously hidden away. I recalled a time when Samantha mentioned meeting an old friend for dinner, yet her phone remained silent on that night. What if those moments were not merely innocent gatherings? What if they concealed secret rendezvous? Driven by a mix of heartbreak and determination, I began to piece together a pattern, a digital mosaic of clandestine meetings, furtive glances, and hushed exchanges that pointed to a life I had never known. In the quiet solitude of my study, illuminated only by the cold light of my monitor, I set up a system to track her online activities. I meticulously recorded timestamps of logins, geolocations, and even subtle nuances in her texting habits. Every piece of information, no matter how minor, was like a puzzle piece that could either reaffirm my suspicions or restore my shattered trust. As I delved deeper, I unearthed text messages that hinted at secret meetings, photographs taken in dimly lit corners of unfamiliar cafes, and even voice memos where her tone betrayed a familiarity that was far too intimate. Amid this digital detective work, I also began discreetly recording snippets of conversation during moments when she thought I wasn't listening. The sound of her voice, normally so soft and reassuring, carried a different cadence when she mentioned names that made no sense to me. The audio recordings captured the subtle shifts in her speech, the inflections of desire, the quickened pace. When a particular name was mentioned, each one a silent testament to the betrayal unfolding before my eyes. I wasn't alone in this quest. A close friend, someone who had been in my corner since the beginning, offered to help. He had access to the multimedia setup of an upcoming event, a birthday celebration of a mutual friend that Samantha was eagerly preparing for. He agreed to let me use the system to present the evidence when the time was right. This friend's involvement gave me the technological edge I needed to compile a convincing case, a digital dossier of the hidden life Samantha had been leading. During long nights that bled into early mornings, I found myself reflecting on every moment we had shared. Each memory was now tainted by the knowledge that behind those smiles, there lay secrets I could no longer ignore. I began to retrace our steps, recalling the laughter and tears that had once bound us together, now reinterpreted through the lens of betrayal. Every whispered promise, every affectionate gesture seemed to carry the weight of a hidden agenda. The pain was as much a part of my investigation as the tangible pieces of evidence I collected. I became both the lover and the detective, haunted by the ghost of what we once were and driven by a relentless need to uncover the full truth. My heart, fractured and determined, pushed me deeper into a maze of digital clues and half-forgotten conversations. I realized that the man I thought I knew was a stranger with a hidden life, and every piece of proof I collected was a step closer to understanding how our perfect illusion had crumbled. As the days turned into weeks, the evidence piled up like scattered fragments of a broken mirror. Each new discovery, an out-of-place photograph here, an enigmatic text message there, contributed to a portrait of betrayal that was as undeniable as it was heartbreaking. The final piece of the puzzle lay in the intimate details. The long, shadowed nights filled with guilt, the frantic whispers over the phone, and the desperate need to conceal every trace of a secret life. In those dark hours, I often wondered if I was too late to salvage what we had once cherished. But amidst the swirling doubts, one truth remained constant. I could no longer live in a state of ignorance. The need to confront the reality, however painful, was paramount. I resolved that I would not be a silent victim of betrayal. I would gather every ounce of evidence, every hidden message, until the full extent of Samantha's duplicity was laid bare, not just for me, but for everyone who had been unwittingly drawn into her web of deceit. The investigation had transformed me. I was no longer the naive, hopeful lover who had once believed in a happily ever after. I had become a man hardened by the necessity of truth, armed with the digital remnants of a love turned sour. And even as the pain of betrayal gnawed at my soul, a strange sense of clarity emerged. I saw the truth in stark, uncompromising detail, and with it, the resolve to reclaim my dignity. I spent long nights cross-referencing dates and times, mapping out the intricate dance of Samantha's secret life. The painstaking process of gathering evidence was interwoven with moments of raw, unfiltered emotion. There were nights when I sat alone in the dim glow of my study, the weight of what I had uncovered pressing down on me, leaving me breathless with sorrow and anger. Yet, each tear shed and every sleepless moment only strengthened my resolve. I could not, and would not, let this betrayal define the rest of my life. In the quiet moments before dawn, as the world outside began to stir and the night yielded, to the first rays of light, I made a silent promise to myself that I would not be broken by this. I would use every shred of the evidence I painstakingly compiled to force a confrontation, a reckoning that would expose the hidden truth and restore the dignity that had been so cruelly ripped away from me. The journey had only just begun, and the path ahead was fraught with pain, uncertainty, and the bitter taste of revenge. As I closed my eyes each night, the montage of images, texts, and whispered conversations played over in my mind like a relentless echo. I was determined to see this through, to turn my heartbreak into a catalyst for retribution. Little did I know that the storm brewing within me was only a prelude to the dramatic reckoning that lay ahead, a reckoning that would not only shatter the illusions of a once perfect love but also force a public unveiling of the truth. In the days that followed, the digital dossier grew ever more damning. I meticulously archived every email, every text message, every photograph that hinted at Samantha's hidden meetings. The evidence was overwhelming, each new discovery reinforcing the betrayal that had once been only a whisper of doubt. And though the act of gathering it was painful, the process transformed my anguish into a calculated determination. I was no longer merely a victim. I was the architect of my own vindication. By the time the fateful birthday celebration was announced, a gathering of mutual friends that promised to be both joyful and unsuspecting, the stage was set for a confrontation that would alter the course of my life. I had planned every detail with an unwavering focus. The images, once hidden and locked away in the digital recesses of my computer, were now ready to be unveiled in a moment of dramatic retribution. The thought of exposing Samantha's betrayal in front of everyone, the friends who had once admired her, the people who had believed in our love, filled me with a fierce sense of purpose. I knew that what I was about to do would change everything. The carefully curated evidence, the secret recordings, the images of stolen moments, all would converge on that one fateful night. It was more than a public confrontation. It was the reclaiming of my self-respect, the final act of defiance against a love that had turned toxic. I realized that while the scars of betrayal would remain, they would also serve as a testament to the strength and resilience of the human spirit. In the midst of heartbreak, I was forging a new identity, one defined by courage, determination, and an unwavering commitment to the truth. As the days drew nearer to that momentous night, I found solace in the quiet assurance that the truth, however painful, would eventually set me free. Every piece of evidence, every sleepless night, and every tear shed was a step toward reclaiming the dignity that had been so cruelly stripped away. And even though the path was steeped in sorrow and regret, I knew that I was no longer a passive bystander in my own life. I was an active participant in the narrative of my existence, a man determined to stand up and expose the illusions that had once clouded his vision. Thus, with the digital dossier secure and my heart steeled against the impending storm, I waited for the night when all would be revealed. In the quiet moments of reflection, I often recalled the early days of our love, the laughter, the dreams, the tender promises that once seemed so inviolable. It was a bitter irony that those cherished memories now served as a stark contrast to the betrayal that had come to define our relationship. Yet even in that irony lay the seeds of transformation. For in exposing the truth, I was not only unmasking the deceit that had torn my world apart, but also reclaiming a piece of myself that had been lost in the process. And so, as I prepared for the final act of confrontation, I embraced the inevitable uncertainty of the future. With every digital footprint uncovered, with every hushed confession recorded, I was constructing a monument to truth, one that would stand as a testament to the resilience of the human heart, even in the face of its deepest wounds. The journey had transformed me, stripping away the naivete of a bygone era and replacing it with a hard-won wisdom born of pain, loss, and ultimately, the courage to confront reality. In the twilight of those long, restless nights, I realized that while love can be blindingly beautiful, it can also be unbearably deceptive. The woman I had once revered had chosen a path of betrayal, and though the wound was deep, I had resolved to let it be the catalyst for my rebirth, a rebirth defined by the pursuit of truth, no matter how painful it might be. In the weeks following the painstaking collection of every damning digital clue, a heavy tension settled over my every thought. The digital dossier was complete, a relentless collection of texts, photographs, and recordings that had transformed my heartbreak into a force of raw determination. Yet the act of gathering evidence had only been the beginning. The true challenge lay ahead, orchestrating the moment that would force Samantha to confront her deception publicly and restore my sense of self-worth. Each day, as I meticulously planned every detail of the upcoming birthday celebration, the anticipation grew into a mix of dread and determination. I spent hours at my desk, sketching out the sequence of events like a director planning the climax of a film. The venue, a chic urban loft chosen for its modern ambiance and excellent multimedia setup, became my stage. I rehearsed the moment, over and over, envisioning the expressions on the faces of our mutual friends as the truth was unveiled. In my mind's eye, their gasps and whispered shock were already a prelude to the reckoning that would change everything. I maintained a careful routine to appear as normal as possible in the days leading up to the event. I continued to interact with Samantha and our circle of friends with a calm, composed exterior, even as my inner world was a tempest of emotion. Every interaction was a careful balancing act. I was the attentive partner by day, all the while concealing the storm of betrayal and revenge that churned beneath the surface. Late nights became the stage for secret meetings with my most trusted friend, the one who had agreed to help me manipulate the multimedia system at the party. In hushed tones and behind closed doors, we reviewed every detail, the order of the slides, the precise moment when the evidence would flicker to life on the giant screen, and the plan to ensure that every trace of Samantha's hidden life would be exposed. The plan was meticulous. It was not just a personal vendetta, but a carefully calculated act of retribution aimed at shattering the illusion of perfection that had once cloaked our lives. I rehearsed the sequence alone in my study, the glow of my computer screen reflecting, the resolute hardness in my eyes. I could almost hear the clock ticking down to that fateful moment, each tick a reminder that time was running out. With every plan, every detail that I scrutinized, I felt the cold clarity of inevitability. Soon, the digital evidence would no longer be confined to my computer. It would become a spectacle witnessed by everyone who had ever admired Samantha, an indisputable testament to her betrayal. The night of the birthday celebration arrived like a fevered dream. The urban loft was a riot of lights and laughter, a vibrant scene that belied the undercurrent of tension that I carried within me. The space was filled with our mutual friends, each person unknowingly participating in the final act of a drama that would forever alter the tapestry of our lives. As I mingled with the guests, every laugh, every smile, and every conversation felt like a prelude to the inevitable climax. I observed Samantha, who moved gracefully through the room, her charm and poise still intact. In her eyes, however, I detected fleeting shadows of guilt that she tried desperately to hide. The gathering was a testament to her carefully curated image, a woman beloved by many, whose life seemed an endless series of joyous occasions. But beneath that shimmering surface lay the truth that I had painstakingly unearthed. The multimedia setup was discreetly tucked away in a corner, the equipment humming quietly as it awaited its cue. I stationed myself in a location with a clear view of both the screen and the guests, my pulse quickening with each passing minute. My heart pounded in rhythm with the anticipation of the moment, a steady drumbeat of retribution that echoed in my ears. A toast was made by the birthday honoree, a dear friend who had long been the glue holding our diverse circle together. The air was filled with well-wishes and laughter, a temporary respite before the storm. Then, as if on cue, I signaled my friend with a subtle nod. In that instant, the lights dimmed, and the atmosphere shifted palpably. All eyes turned toward the large screen that now dominated the far wall of the loft. The screen flickered to life, and for a moment, there was silence, a pregnant pause that seemed to stretch into eternity. Then, slowly, the first images began to appear. Snapshots of secret meetings, dimly lit photographs of stolen moments, and snippets of text messages that spoke of late-night rendezvous. Each image was a stark contradiction to the perfect facade that Samantha had so diligently maintained. Gasps rippled through the room as the slideshow continued. The montage was meticulously timed to expose each element of Samantha's double life in a deliberate, methodical manner. There were images of her laughing with Derek at a quaint, hidden cafe, photos taken in shadowed corners where secrets lingered like cobwebs, and even screenshots of exchanges that blurred the line between professional courtesy and intimate desire. Every piece of evidence was woven together into a narrative that left no room for doubt. As the presentation unfolded, I could feel the weight of every silent gaze and whispered conversation. The shock was palpable. Each guest appeared caught in a web of disbelief, their faces contorting from admiration to astonishment. Samantha's expression transformed from confident composure to a stark realization of impending exposure. The meticulously constructed mask of her public persona began to crack, revealing the raw, unvarnished truth beneath. For a long, agonizing minute, the room was engulfed in a heavy silence. I could see tears welling in the eyes of some friends, a mixture of sorrow and disbelief that struck me as deeply profound. It was a moment of reckoning, not just for Samantha, but for every person who had believed in the illusion of her unblemished character. I stood there, a silent observer to my own retribution, as the montage continued to play out. Each image, each whispered detail of betrayal, was a testament to the pain I had endured and the lengths to which I had gone to reclaim my dignity. The public revelation was not merely about humiliation. It was an assertion of truth over deception, a declaration that betrayal would not be allowed to flourish in the shadows. The climax of the presentation came with a series of audio recordings, where Samantha's own voice betrayed the intimate secrets that had been hidden from me. The recordings, faint yet undeniable, captured the nuances of her tone, the hushed urgency, the fleeting moments of guilt, and the echoes of a love that had long since become tainted. The sound of her voice, once the balm to my soul, now carried the bitter taste of deception. With each word, the facade of invincibility crumbled further, leaving behind a raw, unfiltered narrative of betrayal. Samantha's eyes darted around the room as the reality of her actions sank in. The confrontation was no longer a distant possibility. It was happening right before everyone's eyes. The room, once filled with the warmth of celebration, was now shrouded in an atmosphere of judgment and regret. I could see the shift in the dynamics, the whispered conversations among friends, and the undeniable transformation in the energy of the gathering. The moment of revelation was both cathartic and devastating. For me, it was a moment of reclaiming the dignity that had been so brutally stolen away. For Samantha, it was the shattering of an illusion carefully maintained over years of deception. The montage of evidence left no room for denial, no space for excuses. It was a confrontation with the past, a reckoning that would force everyone present to reevaluate the narratives they had believed. As the light slowly brightened once more, the atmosphere in the loft remained heavy with the echoes of what had just transpired. The room was alive with murmurs of disbelief and hushed discussions about the images that had been shown. I stood, there my heart a tumult of emotions. Vindication mingled with a sorrowful resignation for what had been lost. Samantha, for her part, retreated into the shadows of the room, her eyes red-rimmed and haunted. The confrontation had stripped away her carefully constructed public image, leaving her exposed and vulnerable. In the midst of the chaos, I could see the myriad ways in which the revelation had affected those around us. Friends who had once spoken of her with admiration now exchanged pained glances and murmured words of regret. The fallout was swift and uncompromising. Conversations that once celebrated her virtues were now punctuated with questions and accusations. For me, the aftermath was a complex mixture of relief and sorrow. The long months of investigation, sleepless nights, and painful discoveries had culminated in this single, searing moment of truth. I had succeeded in exposing the deception that had poisoned our relationship, but the victory was bittersweet. The public nature of the revelation meant that the repercussions would ripple far beyond the confines of our private lives. In the hours that followed, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had led to this reckoning. I recalled the early days of love, the moments of hope and shared dreams, and the gradual descent into suspicion and despair. Each memory was now reframed in the harsh light of betrayal, a painful reminder of how love can be both a source of joy and a wellspring of anguish. The evidence, once hidden behind a veil of trust, had forced me to confront the stark reality of our lives, leaving me no choice but to reclaim my dignity by exposing the truth. As the guests slowly dispersed and the loft emptied of its once jubilant crowd, I found a quiet corner to collect my thoughts. There was no immediate fanfare of victory, only a heavy silence that spoke volumes of the cost of truth. In that stillness, I pondered the nature of betrayal and the complex interplay between love and deception. Every choice had led to this moment, moment where the scars of the past were laid bare, and the painful lessons of trust and loss could no longer be ignored. In the days that followed the fateful evening, whispers and rumors filled our social circles. Friends reached out with cautious words of condolence, acknowledging the painful truth that had been unveiled. The aftermath was a mosaic of broken relationships and shifting allegiances. Yet, amid the turmoil, I also began to sense a slow, tentative healing, a realization that while the pain of betrayal might never fully fade, the act of reclaiming the truth had set me on a path toward personal renewal. I withdrew into long walks in the early morning light, finding solace in the quiet of a city waking up to another day. The crisp air and the soft hum of the streets became my companions as I worked through the mixed emotions of loss and liberation. With every step, I allowed myself to mourn not just the end of a relationship, but the loss of innocence and the painful growth that accompanied betrayal. Yet even as I grieved, I discovered a newfound strength, a clarity born from confronting the darkest corners of my past. I began to understand that while love can be a force that uplifts, it can also shatter the very foundation on which trust is built. In that paradox lay the possibility of renewal, a chance to rebuild from the ruins of what once was. I promised myself that I would not let the scars define me, that every painful lesson would eventually transform into the wisdom needed to forge a future, unmarred by deception. As weeks turned into months, the raw emotions gradually subsided into a quiet acceptance. The social aftermath of that night eventually receded into a series of hushed conversations and shared regrets. Samantha, once the vibrant center of our social circle, found herself isolated by the weight of her actions. Meanwhile, I slowly learned to carry the burden of my past with a newfound grace. The evidence that had once been a weapon of revenge transformed into a reminder of the importance of self-respect and honesty, a lesson etched in every painful memory and every digital footprint of deceit. In the silence of those reflective moments, I understood that revenge, though cathartic, came at a steep emotional cost. The public unveiling had restored a measure of dignity, yet it had also left a void, a reminder of the love that had been corrupted and the trust that could never be fully restored. It was in this reflective solitude that I began to see the intricate dance between vulnerability and strength, between the beauty of love and the inevitability of its dark underside. In time, the scars of betrayal faded into a quiet resilience. I found myself opening up to new experiences, to friendships built on the mutual understanding of pain and healing. I embraced the idea that every end, however bitter, carried within it the seeds of a new beginning. And while the memory of that fateful evening would forever be etched in my mind, I resolved to use it as a cornerstone for a future built on the hard-won lessons of honesty and self-respect. The journey had been arduous, a path strewn with shattered illusions and painful truths, but it had ultimately led me to a place of clarity. I learned that exposing betrayal in a public forum was not an act of cruelty, but rather a necessary step to reclaim my own narrative, to force the light of truth upon the dark corners where deceit had once reigned. In that process, I rediscovered a part of myself that had been hidden beneath layers of love and loss, a part that was determined to stand tall in the face of adversity. As I looked toward the horizon of my future, I embraced the bittersweet knowledge that every painful chapter contributed to the person I had become. The reckoning had been dramatic and deeply personal, a defining moment that would forever alter the course of my life. Yet, with the truth finally unveiled and my dignity reclaimed, I stepped forward into the unknown with a cautious optimism, a belief that even in the aftermath of betrayal, there remained a path to healing, growth, and eventually, the promise of a new love that would honor the lessons of the past without being haunted by its shadows.